Hello and welcome to the Scotland Rugby News podcast ahead of Saturday's game against France for Scotland. The team was announced earlier today. I'm joined by Gav and Steph to discuss it and look ahead to the game. I suppose we'll just go straight into it and start off with the team news. There's 3 changes from last weekend. Obviously 2 of them were enforced with injuries, and we see Rory Darge, Grant Gilchrist and Jack Dempsey all come in. Is there any surprises with that for you?
Do you want to go first, Gav?
I can do, yeah. I mean, no surprise for me. I think game's perfectly suited to Jack Dempsey. Pretty abrasive carrier, so yeah, it makes perfect sense that he comes in, and obviously with that, Matt Fagerson slides round from number 8 to 6. Richie Gray's injury opens the door. Grant Gilchrist can come back in there, pretty like for like. And then, yeah, Rory Darge, Gregor Townsend had said that his captain or co-captain would be a nailed-on starter. So I think it makes sense that when Rory Darge is fit, he plays. So, yeah, he's back available this week and back into the starting team, which means no place in the 23 for Jamie Ritchie.
Yeah, I think it's. I suppose I'm sort of a bit surprised that Ritchie has just been completely chucked out of the squad. You'd expect him maybe to be on the bench, but there's no sign of him at all. And given that he was tipped for a long time to be Scotland's captain, and he's been such a great player over the years, it just seems a bit. I think we were talking before we started recording. It's a bit unceremonious, really. But it's no surprise to see Darge back in. Now that he's fit, I think I'm with you, Gav. I think that it makes sense that Dempsey's come in, given the physicality that we're going to have to contend with against France. And I do think Richie Gray is a big loss at the line-out. I think that the line-out doesn't function as well without him. So I'll be keen to see how that plays out on Saturday. But hopefully Gilchrist can step up into that role. I'm not sure how often I've seen Gilchrist play at 4, to be honest. I think he's normally a 5. But yeah, it's generally not surprising changes, but I think that the Ritchie thing is a talking point for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was going to actually move on to next. Was Jamie Ritchie's, like, where does it leave him now? Because obviously he's went from being one of the main men to just. I don't think too many people seem surprised that he's been left out either. So, like, where does it leave him now?
I think it's a weird one because it's Gregor Townsend's talked about how he wants to kind of motivate Jamie Ritchie to be better, and give him a reason to work harder and get back into the squad. But to be chucked out of the setup completely and chucked out of a match day 23, is that motivating? I feel like that's a bit demoralising. I don't know what you think, Gav.
I mean, I suppose there's 2 ways of looking at it. That every player has to deal with setbacks and non-selections, and it's probably not a huge surprise that he's not on the bench, because he's somebody who can play 6 or 7. Whereas Andy Christie, Gregor Townsend talked here about an hour ago about Andy Christie being able to play across the back row. Josh Bayliss probably more similar in that respect. So I think Christie gives Scotland more back row cover than Ritchie might do. So in that respect, it's not a huge surprise that he's not got that job on the bench. But yes, I suppose it could be demoralising. But I guess Gregor's talked about potentially Jamie Ritchie gets an opportunity next week with Edinburgh. And if he does get that, then he might just have a bit of a point to prove.
I mean, I think there's other players in the squad as well that have kind of came back from being dropped out. I think Hugh Jones spoke about it just before the tournament started, about how he seemed like he could do nothing to get back into the squad, and then all of a sudden he's back in as sort of like a key player again. So it's kind of almost like that way where Jamie Ritchie has to look at it and think, I just need to work hard and get myself back in, and Gregor should select them again.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, look at Richie Gray. I mean, who thought he would come back into the Scotland squad? And he's when he's fit, he's like a nailed-on starter now. So that's a good way of looking at it for Richie, definitely.
Also, Gav, you said there you're through at the Oriam talking to Gregor today. So you got anything interesting for us to discuss?
Oh, I mean, plenty interesting. We'll have a piece out on the site later on. But yeah, I think it's just interesting that he's obviously he's made these changes. He kind of talked a bit about why he's made them, but he also talked a bit about France and some of their threats, the likes of Damien Penaud, and obviously they make the trip without Antoine Dupont. Yes, we talked a bit about them as well, and reflected a wee bit on the win in Cardiff.
Yeah. Also, Steph, you weren't on the podcast earlier in the week when we discussed Cardiff. What were your thoughts on that game? Because it was a bit mental, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if that quite covers it. It was, apart from the draw at Twickenham in 2019, it was the most insane Scotland game I'd ever watched, I think. I suppose the 2010 game with Wales at Cardiff was before my time, in the sense of I wasn't living in Scotland. I wasn't really following Scotland rugby at that point. I'm very aware of what happened. And my husband was mentally scarred by it and has had some hostility towards Wales ever since, let's just say. But yeah, I know it echoed that fixture. It was just... To talk about the cliche of a game of two halves, Scotland were incredible. They looked so slick in the first half, and you almost couldn't believe it was happening. And you almost thought maybe we could do with a bit of jeopardy. Maybe so be careful what you wish for situation. And then, I mean, I don't think I ever felt confident that we were far ahead enough. But equally, I did not expect the game to turn in the way that it did. I still don't quite understand how Scotland managed to concede 14 penalties in a row. I don't think I've ever seen that, and you can question the officials if you want to, and also Scotland's discipline. I expect as a combination of both, but it was absolutely a mental game. But I think, and it felt like a loss for a bit afterwards. But I think reflecting on it now, I think that Scotland would not have closed out that game a few years ago, and they did. It was 27-26 for a good nearly 10 minutes, and they managed to close that out. So I think that credit has to be given for that, and it's obviously a first win in Cardiff for a very, very long time.
I think that comment that you made there kind of sums up Scotland over the last few years, where even at 27-0, you're still not confident that Scotland are far enough ahead to actually win it.
I was actually raging about comments that Ian Madigan came out with this week when he was saying, all the Scotland players would have been thinking, this is the best chance of a slam at 20-0 up. I was like, I don't think any Scotland players are thinking that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Thinking, is this really happening?
Yeah, we've all been there too often, I think, to counter chickens that early.
Yeah, obviously, like it's France this week. A bit of a wounded animal coming to Murrayfield after last week's game, where I don't think many people saw such a defeat coming for them. So, how worried is that they're going to come with a point to prove that they're still one of the best?
Yeah, look, they were really poor on Friday night, and they'll be disappointed with that. They're obviously off to a pretty disappointing start from their point of view, and they've made a couple of changes, which is not the French way of rip it up and start again. So that shows a level of faith from Galtier and his team. So they'll obviously be hurting. I expect that, as I think everybody does, a reaction from France. So Scotland will have to be at their close to their best, if not right up there. And it's obviously a difficult challenge for Scotland, but at home they've proven in the past that they can beat anybody. So it should be a really entertaining game. Yeah,
I think we also spoke last week as well about the atmosphere at the Principality and how much it helps Wales, but there's almost a similar sort of feeling at Murrayfield, where if the crowd are right behind Scotland, it gets them right fired up, and it can be a big help if there's a really good atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. The French don't travel well, do they? So they always struggle on the road generally. I think I can understand some of the changes that they've made. I'm a little bit surprised maybe that Le Garrec hasn't come in at scrum half, because I think that I'm not sure that I think he's getting a lot of flack, but I'm not sure Luko was quite up to the standard required on Friday. I think you saw the big difference with his box kicks in comparison to Dupont, and the fact that I think you saw that Dupont's able to get France out of sticky situations from at scrum half, and Luko wasn't able to do that quite as well. So I suppose I'm surprised at that, but yeah, it's a situation if you just don't know what France are going to turn up after that, and that's been the case with them for many years, I suppose.
Yeah, that is very true. Just go back to the team selection again. If I could just ask you, there's a lot of talk online about Johnny Matthews not being in the 23 again. Are you surprised that he's not even getting onto the bench? He's also been in great form this season, but just doesn't seem to be in the picture just now.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I suppose there's probably part of the logic that Ashman and Turner have slightly, have a lot more experience at this level, at international level. So that maybe shades it in their favour just somewhat. But I think the other thing to consider is, France will come pretty direct at Scotland on Saturday, and I'm not sure if Turner and Ashman just slightly edge Johnny Matthews in terms of scrummaging. That might be a factor. Gregor, it was one of the subjects Gregor didn't really talk about today, but surprised a little bit because he's been in such good form, and I think he'll get a chance at some point during the championship, but I'm not 100% convinced that this is the right game for him. I think probably the other two are slightly better suited to playing against France than he might be.
Is that something you'd agree with as well, Steph?
Yeah, it's a shame not to see him involved because he has been in such good try-scoring form for Glasgow. But I suppose the other areas of his game might be something that obviously will be something that Townsend's thinking about. And I'd certainly like to see, and not that I underestimate Italy at all anymore, because they I think that they're such a competitive outfit now. But I think I would like to see him given a chance in that game, definitely. Perhaps the England game, something's telling me that the England game might, maybe off the bench, might suit him as well. It's always an exciting fixture, so hopefully we'll see him involved down the line. But I think it is the competition at hooker is strong, like it is in the back row. So I think it's a tough one.
Yeah, we've also spoke about it a wee bit already, but the disciplinary issues of the second half last week with the penalty count. Also, we've got an article on the website today, sort of analysing it all. It's a really good read for anyone that wants to click on and see it. But how important is it? I know it's kind of stating the obvious, but just how important is it to just get that improved this weekend? Because you won't get away with that against France.
Yeah, you won't. That's right. I mean, against Wales, Scotland were perhaps a wee bit lucky in the tail end of the first half that the Welsh line-out, the Welsh set piece kind of didn't really function, and they sorted that out. They made a couple of changes at half-time and they rectified that second half. But France's set piece is so strong that give them those opportunities to win penalties, then you put yourself under pressure in terms of conceding territory, and then as soon as that enormous French pack, which is just a joke, get on top, then you're struggling. I think one of my pieces from Cardiff was about Scotland won the gain line for the first 40 minutes and just blew Wales away, and they'll not do that this weekend. If they can get parity with France, then they give themselves a good chance. But they put themselves under a fair amount of pressure with the penalties they gave away. Whether that was their own indiscipline or refereeing decisions. They'll have to just be squeaky clean this week.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, I think it was concerning to hear Finn Russell's interview after the match a little bit, but maybe it's a good thing that it's being picked up on by him, that he was saying certain individuals were not responding to messages. They were saying, we need to stop going at rucks because we're being penalised for it, and they didn't stop doing that. So it's something they definitely need to rectify. It's just kind of hoping that the messages do actually start getting across and that they pick up on that.
Yeah, I thought Greg Gilchrist's comments earlier in the week were really interesting as well, because also he spoke about the chaos of the second half, but he spoke also about how the first 50 minutes were some of the best rugby that he's seen Scotland play. And I think we spoke about this on Monday as well, Gav. It's kind of almost been forgotten that Scotland were that good in the first half. Like it almost became a thing that Wales just weren't up for it at that point, and then all of a sudden Wales turned up. But it could also be seen the other way about, where Scotland were brilliant for that 50 minutes. If they were complacent, as we spoke about, but you've got to take that confidence from that first half and sort of go with it going into France, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. I think you can make a lot of how Wales came back, but had Scotland gone and put another 15 points on Wales, people would have said, Scotland were brilliant, and not, well, Wales were terrible in the first half, which they were, and fair play to them, they turned it round. But yeah, I think that first half was up there. One of the most clinical, if not like one of the best performances, one of the most clinical performances I've seen from Scotland for a while. And I guess in these games that are going to be tight, you need to take every chance, whether that's taking 3 points or defensively not conceding. And Scotland will have to be at that clinical again and that ruthless again on Saturday, in terms of both scoring points and in terms of stopping France.
Yeah, definitely. And then another thing that seems to be talked about a lot this week again is Ben Healy's role. Obviously, he was sort of left on the bench last week, was unused, and then again he's named in the 23 this week. But I think people are sort of trying to debate it and see whether it's really necessary to have him there. But what do you think on it? Is it important to have him there because there's not really anybody else who can sort of like come in and fill in for Finn in case of an injury or in case of anything else?
Yeah, I think I said this earlier in the week, that I think without him, you'd be asking an awful lot of somebody like a Cam Redpath to step in to play 10 at international level. So, the omission or the injury to Blair Kinghorn probably means that Gregor's hand is forced somewhat, because he doesn't have somebody in the team who's a load of experience at stepping in and playing 10. So yeah, I think you do probably need him, and you never know, if Scotland get in front, or if Scotland are hunting a late drop goal to win the game, he might come on and Finn might go to 12, or Hugh Jones could go to the wing, and there's loads of. I think the thing about this Scotland team is there's plenty of versatility. That although Ben Healy is only a 10, everybody else around him can play probably 2 or 3 positions.
Yeah, I think you definitely need him. And he offers something completely different to Finn Russell as well. I think like you say, if Scotland are ahead and they need to close out a game, I know they did manage to do that last weekend, but let's not close out every game like that. let's not hope for that. I think that Ben Healy's can bring a lot of control to a game and close it, and is a good guy to close it out. And I think you absolutely need him. It's not like Scotland have a lot of strength and depth in terms of 10s, so it's been a kind of ongoing issue. So he definitely needs to be. Then I'm sure that he will get an opportunity.
Yeah, and I know I've also spoke a lot about the split of the bench over the last week or so, but again, with Ben there, obviously it goes to a 5-3. But with the size of that French team, would it have been, especially if he's going to be another unused replacement again this week, would it have been better to maybe have somebody in there and go 6-2, or is it just that it's too important to have him there as cover for Finn because there's nobody else?
Yeah,
I'm not sure that. Yeah, you go.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, I think that not having the cover, almost it forces that decision again. Whereas, had Blair Kinghorn been fit, yes, you maybe could stick an extra forward on the bench. You have that wee bit more flexibility. In an ideal world, would we have another guy on the bench who could come on and play in the forwards? Yes, it also would have been an easier decision for Gregor, because I imagine that probably would have been Jamie Ritchie. So, he wouldn't have had to have jettisoned his former captain out the 23, and he could have kept him there on the bench. But no, I think it's something like I said last week, he's something he's talked about a fair bit, the whole 6-2 bench, and only done, I think, a couple of times in all the years that he's been Scotland coach. So am I surprised? Not really. Do I think another coach would have viewed it differently and just said, right, okay, we'll match France and play them at their own game? Then, yeah, I think that's, somebody like a Warren Gatland might think like that. But I also think it's important that Scotland play their own style, and that style might be get the ball on the pitch as quick as possible and move France about.
Yeah, is that something you agree with, Joseph?
Yeah, I was just going to say what Gav said at the end there. I think that Scotland need to play to their strengths. I think you always should do that, and I'm not sure they really have the team at times to have a strong 6-2 bench. And I think that they do need to play to their strength, and their strength is throw the ball around, and they've got world-class backs. So I think that although it is tempting to try and match France's physicality and France's size, I do think that Scotland need to focus on their own strengths and try and look at how they can use that.
I think the other thing to say on that is that obviously having Sam Skinner on the bench, and I think that's probably why he stays on the bench rather than him coming in for Richie Gray as he did in Cardiff, is that he gives you that little bit more versatility because he plays in the back row. So you have a wee bit more flexibility with him on the bench than you would have done with somebody like a Grant Gilchrist, who's an out-and-out second row. And then obviously Andy Christie can play right across the back row. But, we've seen situations in the past where somebody like a George Turner's ended up there. So I think in the forward, Scotland have enough cover and again enough of that versatility that you can afford a Ben Healy on the bench in case there's a disaster and Finn goes down early doors and you need that cover.
Yeah, that's right. I think we'll finish off just with a quick look at the other couple of games as well. As obviously Ireland, Italy on Sunday and England, Wales the other game on Saturday. Last weekend we saw 3 away victories, which was quite surprising in the Six Nations, but I think we'll hopefully see 3 home wins this weekend.
Yeah, I definitely think so.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, I think so as well. I think you'll see a reaction from Wales, particularly given the first half performance, and I think England will be better than they were in Rome. Italy, I've just got to keep building again, and Ireland will just want to kind of build on what was a great performance in Marseille. I thought they were, for me, that was the surprise game of the weekend, and I always thought that England-Italy would be close, but the manner of Ireland's win in Marseille was surprising. And yes, France were poor, but I also thought that Ireland just got that spot on. And I think there's possibly some tactical stuff that Scotland might take out of how Ireland nullified the French that we might see repeated at the weekend.
Yeah, I thought Ireland were frighteningly good on Friday. I think that we talked about some changes that they've had to go through, losing Johnny Sexton and Jack Crowley coming in, but he was great. It looked like he'd been running the show for ages, and it was, like you say, France were not at the races, but I think Ireland were more impressive than France were poor. And it's a tough one for Italy this weekend because they were really impressive in the England game. I think they scored the most points they've ever scored against England, and I think it's been a long time since England has scored that few against Italy as well. So they're really, really competing, and I think that Italy will win a game in the Six Nations, but I don't think it's going to come in Dublin. They gave Ireland a good game last Six Nations. They really, really did, and they were one of the teams that potentially looked like they were possibly going to upset them. So I'm sure that they have the ability to give them a good game, but I don't think there's going to be an upset there. I don't think that will be a comfortable Ireland win. I think England will have enough as well. I think that if you look at the history of Wales at Twickenham, the last time they won was 2012. Before that was at the late 80s, I think. So the history is not on Wales' side. I heard an absolutely crazy stat this morning as well about the fact that Wales have only ever scored one try in the first half of this against England at Twickenham in the Six Nations. I think that was right, that's crazy. So you can see how difficult it is for them there. So I think that will be an England win. They weren't that great in Rome, but I think they will get better, as you say. And that's that covered, isn't it?
I think where the Scotland game is different is that it feels like we're the home team, the only home team this weekend who might need to stay in the fight first half and hope that we're in it with 20 minutes to go. Whereas you look at the other two away teams and that would be what they're looking at. You'd be looking at Wales and Italy saying, okay, if they're in the game at half-time, for Italy, that would be a massive tick in the box. For Wales, if they're less than 30 points down at half-time, they've got a shout. But that's definitely the difference, is that Scotland will, to a degree, have to hang in there with France and see where the game is with 20 minutes to go, I think, unless they get off to another flying start.
Yeah. Well, we'll leave it there for the day. Just a reminder that you can become a subscriber for Scotland Rugby News by going to scotlandrugbynews.com/subscribe. You can pay £1 for 6 months of coverage, and with that you'll have a chance to win 2 Calcutta Cup tickets as well. So Gav and Steph, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you after the game.